Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Camaldolese Podcast, where we discuss modern-day spirituality at the intersection of monastic and worldly living. We hope you enjoy this episode on Camaldolese spirituality and their natural lifestyle. If you'd like to hear more, please subscribe, leave a like, and visit our website, mrcslow.org. Okay, welcome everyone to the show. My name is Andrew Souza, and I would like to introduce Father Daniel. Father Daniel, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the beautiful place that we're in, the monastery?
Okay. Well, I'm Father Daniel Manger. I'm the prior of the Monastery of the Risen Christ here in San Luis Obispo and at 2308 O'Connor Way. And I've been here as the prior for 9 years now. And the Camaldolese community that I belong to is out of Big Sur, California, at the New Camaldolese Hermitage, where I was a resident hermit monk for about 21 years there, or 22. Then I was asked by the superior there to consider coming here because the monastic community of the Olivetan Benedictines, who had been here since the mid-1980s, wanted to transfer their vow of stability to our community. And so I was sent to do that transfer process with them in the formation into the Camaldolese approach to Benedictine life. And so being here for 9 years, kind of restoring the monastic presence and the Camaldolese charism in this area of California has been an exciting and also enlightening kind of experience from living in a hermitage situation to being here in a regular monastery as such. So we sit on 40 acres here on the Sierra Romaldo, which is historically was named after the Portuguese explorer whose name was, he was baptized under Saint Romuald, who happened to be the founder of the Camaldolese tradition. Mm-hmm. And so here we are on Mount Sierra Romaldo, and Camaldolese, who are followers of St. Romuald's way of living monastic life 1,000 years later. So it's quite a privilege to be on the only mountain that I know of that's named after St. Romuald.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's quite the coincidence. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I've never knew that about the connection to St. Romuald over here.
Yeah. The Seven Sisters, as they call, we're in what they call the Irish Valley, mm-hmm. Named after the Irish immigrants who had come here to farm and raise cattle after the Portuguese, and then before them, I think the Spanish were here because of the missions, San Luis Obispo with Junipero Serra, mm-hmm. And then before that, it was Chumash territory. They probably had roamed and lived this property for thousands of years, more mm-hmm. than likely. So, and as a matter of fact, I think the owner of the property in the late 1800s was one of the last Chumash to own the property. Before it was sold to a white settler who was here for many, many years. And then beyond that was a dentist who had bought the property from them. Mm-hmm. But it's remained pretty much the way the families that have preceded us have been. And the monastic community, we keep the property intact as far as a small footprint on it. Because of ecological reasons and the buffer to create a natural sense of silence for people and quiet for them to come and encounter God when they're on retreat here, or just for coming over for a few hours for meditation on the property. So,
wow. Does the connection to St. Romuald, did that have any effect or say in putting the monastery here, of all places, when you wanted to branch out from the hermitage?
Well, the prior general, who's the successor of St. Romuald in Italy, in Tuscany, where we are, he was very excited about the development of the presence of the Camaldolese here, but he agreed that it's okay for us to remain kind of small, in the sense that even though we're really small with only two monks living here right now, we originally had four, but one had to return to the hermitage to help with the water system, and the other one died about 4 years ago. So we're hoping, though, that we would have a company of at least maybe three or four more monks, and we could probably handle that here. But small is not necessarily a bad thing from both a spiritual point of view and an economy of the spirit, because Jesus taught that the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. So we sort of kind of go on that mustard seed principle spiritually and mystically, that if we're devoted to God and to God's people and the creation, then God will provide, what's necessary to maintain that.
Yeah. How many Camaldolese are there across the world?
There's only around perhaps 130 or so.
Okay.
140 maybe. It's grown a little bit. We have now a monastery in China, and that just opened this past year. We also have our first monastery in Africa, in Tanzania, and then also our nuns are there as well. They've been there almost 30 years before us, but the male version is now indigenous there in both the feminine and the masculine expressions of our life, although they live several kilometers apart there in Dar es Salaam. And outside of Dar es Salaam, and we also are in India as well. But the bulk of our houses are in Italy, and we do have one in Germany, which is a new monastery foundation there. So it's pretty. Although we're small, we're very tangible, and as far as our expression of life and how people are attracted to us for various experiences of prayer and ministry and interreligious dialogue as well.
I think a lot of people know about the Hermitage in Big Sur, and a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with the monastery here or know that it's connected to the Hermitage. So do you want to maybe get into a little bit the connection between the two?
Yeah, the Camaldolese tradition is what they call the threefold good that St. Romuald kind of set up by his way of living. And one of those is the hermitage life is available to monks who want to pursue more intense solitude and contemplative prayer pursuits based on the discernment of the community. The bulk of the monks usually are in what they call the cenobium, or what you would call a regular monastery, where you live in groups, whether it's 2, 4, 6, or 20, or 30, or 100, or more. And so that dimension of our life is very much present and is part of the Benedictine tradition, anyway, of people living a covenantal spirituality with one another in the brotherhood or sisterhood in their communities. And then the third good is the preaching of the gospel to the Gentiles, or to people who wouldn't necessarily be Christian, but to be in mission and evangelization, we would probably call it today. and that is another expression of our life too, So,
Mm-hmm.
so the idea is there's a fluidity for one who joins the Camaldolese to move in and out of these three experiences, which we call the privilege of love. And so at one period in your type in, say if you're initially coming in the community, you would spend a bulk of your time in the early years living more of a common life of a regular monk in a cenobium. And then sometimes you might be inspired to do evangelization, or you might be inspired by the Lord to go deeper into a more increased solitude with others.
Mm-hmm.
The solitude is solitude in community, though, as well. It's not reclusion like some people think. You live in separate hermitage, but you gather for prayer and for a common meal and so forth. But it's different than living in the same building with several people, with just say a bedroom and that sort of thing, but and also laboring in common for the well-being of the community and whatever cottage industry may be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Evangelization can be where you are on the road and you're traveling and you may not necessarily be in a monastery or hermitage. You might be just living by your wits, to be out among the people in some foreign land or whatever. But in a modernization approach would be like, say, if we have one of our monks, Father Michael Fish, who lives in a small leased place up in Santa Cruz, but he does a lot of experience of preaching retreats to different religious communities and so forth. So he's moving around a lot. It's very, very mobile that way.
Mobile monk. A monk on the run.
That's right. But I've done that too. I mean, when I was living at the Hermitage and was the manager of our bookstore there, and I would give retreats off campus there and go to parishes for parish renewals and other different faith communions in Christianity and particular topics. And then I would take a lot of literature with me, and artwork, because we're famous too for the arts and music and liturgical things of different and where we were in the ancient times of apothecarians as well. Mm-hmm. In our history. So we've got a lot there as a contribution. And we were both apothecarians, but we were also carers of the land. If you had a monastery like this, or in Italy, it was prescribed in the constitutions that you couldn't even cut down a tree without a vote from the entire community on whether to cut a tree down. And so from the earliest times, the monks were carers of the land, and we were kind of finding that's still what we're doing. We're stewarding beautiful properties that are a grace to us, but also to the human race and all other creatures. So that's part of how that privilege of love and the threefold good kind of, in many ways, gets a variety of expressions,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of room to grow in different dimensions of one's life, as a human being, And our focus is on the first vocation is become a real human being, in the pattern of Christ, He's kind of the blueprint of humanity,
Of course, yeah.
So, and that takes time, It's like I often say, spirituality doesn't flourish in a microwave. It's a slow bake process.
Yeah, yeah. It's really it's not hard to feel human when you're out here on this amazing property. Mm-hmm. Like we're sitting underneath this beautiful oak tree right here, and if we stepped out of like a couple yards, This way, we would see Hollister Peak in the background. You can go around the corner, see Bishop's Peak. There's just so many breathtaking views around here for you who live here and the retreatants. I could just imagine how it's much easier to get in touch spiritually when you're able to just sit in, either in group or in solitude out here in nature. It's really, really important. And, we've kind of started moving towards urbanized life. People don't necessarily get this kind of experience very often. It's very nice. To take the opportunity to go on retreat out here, I think is really important.
Yeah, we've had many comments where folks who come here, as well as to the Hermitage and our other place in Berkeley, which is more urbanized, certainly it's different, with a small monastery in an urban setting, with zero property except for the buildings, pretty much. But here, like at the Hermitage, it's, as you say, there something very tangible happens in a recovery of something very essential to just being a person on this planet, and in concert and in harmony with so many other creatures that you share this beautiful planet with. And we had a young Cal Poly student about 2 years ago. I was hosting this program for them. They were all master's students in the garden. They were all becoming master gardens and all that sort of thing. And so they asked for the teacher and them asked for a project that they could come on our property. So I gave them a project of what would a monastic garden look like, and I explained to them the tradition of a monastic garden, which they weren't aware of. Most people didn't realize that almost every monastery always had a garden in its cloister. And the garden represented Eden. And it always had a fountain, a source of water. You could grow flowers, crops there, things like that. But it was always, even if you were in a major urban center, it was always to have a patch of property that might be enclosed, but it was a place where the monks or nuns could go and encounter and keep them tethered, to the natural world. And so they came up with a lot of interesting designs, because one of my future visions here was to develop a monastic kind of garden experience where, for our retreat guests and that, at least, they could have an encounter that way as well, with both the natural beauty, but at the same time, different kinds of flora and fauna that might evoke that for them. But one student's comment was, as many of them were, when they walked the property by themselves, in pondering this idea, one of them came back and he voiced this thing. He said, I believe in God, and I don't really go to church, but he said, I find God in nature speaking to me. And do you think that that's crazy? And so I said to him, no. I said, that's, you're walking in the first Bible. I said, in our tradition, St. Anthony of the Desert, which was more than almost 2,000 years ago, was a young man who went into desert tradition outside of Egypt. And his comment, and one of the quotes from him, was that the creation is my Bible, my first Bible. And then the written Bible is the one that I read, but I also read the first one. And so I think that's it's interesting. That's been echoed by great saints like in the Benedictine tradition and the Franciscan tradition too. So you're right on target with that, with the affect that you feel when you're here, and that's why we try to be stewards of that for folks.
Right. I hear all the time people saying that they encounter God, or they explain it by saying there's something greater out there when I'm out in nature, when I'm backpacking, when I'm hiking, when I'm gardening. And, it's a direct encounter with God's creation directly. God created everything, of course. When you're in an urbanized center, that's, a lot of like man-made creation, building up, concrete jungle, as they say. But when you're out in nature, you are directly encountering God's direct creation right there in front of you. And, it's easy for him to speak in his beauty to you in the natural beauty that we see, instead of us trying to create some sort of man-made beauty ourselves. So I think it's very, very amazing that your order, and this monastery in particular, has such a focus on nature being a focus in everything you do, in like the retreats that you offer here, and even the chapel that you have down the hill. Two of the walls are glass walls. You can just see out into nature when you're looking around. If you're not looking up at the altar or at the tabernacle, you're seeing God's creation out there.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's when it's like in Franciscan spirituality too. St. Francis had that same kind of experience, and part of his encounters that everything in creation was sort of like a sacramental. And from a Catholic tradition, it'd be like everything was blessed like holy water is or something. And of course, his great poem, The Canticle of the Sun, gives full expression in a poetic way. He calls it brother sun, sister moon, and so forth. And Pope Francis recently, with his encyclical Laudato Si, is a direct quote, the title of the encyclical from St. Francis. And that particular poem, which shows the harmonics of all creation, and more, I think, with the ecological concerns, it's very important for us all, first of all, to have that affective experience of God's beauty and creation, and we can really have direct contact through something gifted to us that way. And it will be revelatory in its own way about the diversity of God's imagination. Just from that point of view alone,
of course,
teaches us something about ecumenism, about the poignant problems of racism right now, that diversity is, and other social ills. One of the problems is I think because we're we're disconnected, that there's a radiant diversity that is in the design of God that teaches us something in the Bible of creation, and it's really ratified in the Scriptures itself, of the inclusivity of Jesus. Even he uses a lot of nature images in his parables and so forth. Even the kingdom of God is seen as like a great tree, a mustard tree growing, and then provides a place for birds to shelter and everything. He uses those kind of images all the time.
Throughout all the Gospels, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's something very organic about our to use a big word, an incarnational spirituality, which I think is at the heart of contemplation and really at the heart of monastic life, because it's been misshapen by the idea that we were supposed to be so detached that monks and nuns were supposed to shun, things in creation, or close yourself up, wall yourself up away from everything.
Yeah.
What they called it, the fuga mundi in Latin, to flee the world. But that's a poor misinterpretation. The use of world was the idea of the spirits of passions that drive us to do dastardly things, in our lives. That was what you were trying to shed out of your own life, But that puts you at the heart of everybody else's struggle, because you have the same struggles as everybody else in some form or fashion.
Sure.
So detachment was really misshapen in the late Middle Ages and in the early centuries, and that's been an unfortunate thing that in the popular mind has created a kind of crazy divorce between creation and spirituality. And I think we're living in a fortunate time where people are saying they're awake to this, more and more.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a lot to overcome that in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and the monastery are very open to the world as far as those who do not, or are not a part of your order, or people who just live in this area who want to take advantage of this beautiful space or the chapel or whatever else you have to offer. You said that a lot of people show up to Sunday Mass here, which is wonderful, and the people take advantage of that. But what other things are there that maybe the public doesn't know that they can, participate in the monastery here?
Well, for example, we put in down below as you come on the property a labyrinth, which and it was done by high school students and families who are from different faith traditions, and those stones and everything down there were gathered from the land itself. And it was a big effort, about 20 or 30 people to put the exact size and shape of the same labyrinth that's in the floor of the Chartres Cathedral in France. Because in the Middle Ages, labyrinths were very important methodologies of meditation, a walking meditation, which meant I'm walking to the summit of the New Zion. And I was walking to the expression of the fullness of discipleship through the image of the Virgin Mary, who sits at the center of the new creation, say, in the Ark of the Covenant. So we put that down there because they had closed in the area. There was a public labyrinth, and it got on the property that it was on. There were some problems, I guess, with some of the land movement and stuff like that. So as I understood, it got closed down. So there were a lot of people who, we kept hearing this idea about, boy, I wish there was a labyrinth. I used to enjoy that for meditation. And friends of friends would. So I thought, and I remembered that the former abbot here from the Olivets, he always wanted to put a labyrinth on the property, but never got around to do it before he died. And the connection also with the Irish tradition, because in Ireland, labyrinths, ancient labyrinths that go back to the Celtic experience are prevalent through England and Ireland. So I thought, well, that would make a nice connection between a long, long, long history of walking meditation. And so these people gathered, and one elderly grandmother who had to sell her house in San Luis Obispo, she and her great-grandson brought stones that she had put down in the ground with her father almost 80 years ago, because she didn't want the stones to get lost. They had gone down to the beach and gathered them in the early 1900s, I think. And so there she was on her hands and knees with her great-grandson, and they were putting some of their stones from her childhood garden down there.
Wow.
That's the kind of connection that's there from the local folks.
Yeah.
And then stones in our own field, And so that's one of the ways that a person can come. They can just come on the property, and most of the time during the daytime, because we don't have it illuminated at night. But they can sit there and walk. And now we have, like, the Shumash people come. We have people from all over the county who just come and walk there in their sacred journey, and find consolation there. And we consecrated it to the Blessed Mother as in a Catholic tradition, and so it was blessed. And then we put in the outdoor Way of the Cross that runs nearby it all the way up to a Celtic cross, which was a replica of the one found in Ireland that's UNESCO had rescued to keep it from getting destroyed. But that tradition is there too, of the Italian Portuguese tradition of the Way of the Cross, which was attributed to the Franciscans. And so being Franciscan heritage through here, and the Italian Portuguese community, we thought, now that's another way to touch another level of spirituality. And of course the cross of Jesus for all Christians is a great sign, of both consolation and their own journey with Jesus. So those stations were donated from a friend of ours who was an oblate, and they're beautifully done from the monastery in Vallermo, where she had gotten the first set of the ceramic ones that were made there by the monks. And then we put in the statue, the cross, the Celtic cross there, which on one side of the cross, and it sits on the exact axis of east and west, as tradition would be. And in the morning, if you stand on one side with the sun coming through the oculus on the cross, you're looking at the resurrection. And that was the tradition in the Christian Celts, that you would go out and gather with the whole village, and they would pray the Our Father together.
Wow.
And on that side is a relief on every story in the Bible, both Old Testament and New, of the resurrection and the second coming. If you stand on the opposite side, which they would gather at sunset, it's the passion and death of Jesus, and also Adam and Eve fleeing the garden and so forth. And so it's done in a way to where children could go up because they couldn't read and write. It's like a Braille cross. So you could actually, whether you were blind or if you were a child, and the monks in the early centuries would teach the whole Bible and catechism off that cross.
Wow.
And so they would gather at sunset and at sunrise, because in Celtic spirituality, even pre-Christian Celtic spirituality they called it the thinning place at sunrise and sunset, because they believed that that's where heaven and earth were the closest. And you got a depiction of what eternity would be. So the Celtic monks, the Christianity came in and they said, that's not a bad idea. And so it became a very organic way of talking about the great mystery of the death and resurrection of us all through Christ. And so people can come and they can do that experience too. See, it recovers that. And then we have a statue to the first indigenous saint, Kateri Tekakwitha, or Kateri Tekakwitha. And we wanted to honor all the ancient Chumash and Salinas folks who lived on and died and had their children and everything in this area, and to honor their traditions. So there's a life-size statue of St. Kateri Tekakwitha, the first indigenous woman to be canonized by the Roman Church, to honor all those traditions and all those people's spiritual journeys. And we have the Chumash come and they do drummings there, and they'll lay flowers and things like that. And then we planted olive trees all along there to remind us of the Garden of Gethsemane, and the image of the oil, the healing presence of olive oil, was always used in the sacraments of the church and in the Old Testament too, to anoint people. And we call it the way of resurrection, because it ends with the resurrection of Jesus up by the Celtic cross. So those things are available. And then on the upper property, as you go up past the monastic residence, there are 3 viewing sites up there where people can go and they can sit. There we have benches up there, and they can just sit in just to enjoy the creation just as it is. There's beautiful viewpoints up there. So and then the chapel's open every day for folks who would like to come and just do a meditation time in the chapel, or join us for different liturgical prayer services, the monastic round and the Mass and so forth.
And you have those kinds of things every single day. You have Mass every day, meditation. I know you do Vespers in the evening in the chapel. So lots of things to take advantage of.
Oh, yeah. So people don't have to be strangers just because they They don't have to be coming here for an official liturgy. They can come and have their own experience, here. And then if they want to see one of us, they just let us know. They can come up to the residence or call us ahead of time, and we can be available for spiritual direction or the sacraments if they want to receive the sacraments and so forth.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Camaldolese Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like. And if you'd like to further support the Monastery of the Risen Christ, visit mrcslow.org to donate.